think about something. Have you ever tried to do something on your own that was not meant to be done by yourself? And you found out it was probably not the best way to do it. I can remember when I was still at home and I lived with my parents, we were redoing our back deck. And so it pretty much torn down our old back deck and we were going to expand, make it a little bigger. And what we were doing is we tore the old back deck down. We had decided that we were going to put a roof over the new deck that we were going to do. And so as we were building the new deck, in the evenings we'd get home and Dad and I would put up the boards and try to put the roof on. Well, one day I got home early and thought, well, I'll go ahead and get started, and he'll come home and help. Maybe he'll even be impressed that I got some of it up. Was not impressed because it was a job not meant to be done by myself. So I grabbed a board, tried to put it up on the existing ceiling because you tie into the original house. Well, what I did is I got this big board up and it's heavy. It's super long. I'm trying to get it up. I'm on a ladder. So I attach it to the side of the house. But it gets so heavy and I'm on a ladder that I drop the board and it rips like some of the awning and eave off of the side of the house. And so what I originally thought, oh man, this would be great. I'll go ahead and get a head start. Dad will be happy I got up a couple of these things and got them knocked out. It took us like 5 hours to replace all the damage that I done. And it was a moment where I thought, that was not a job that was meant just for me. It was meant for both of us. It didn't matter who you were. There was no way physically that you were going to get this board and all of this stuff up done by yourself. That's similar to what happens in Mark chapter 9. They try to do something by themselves, the disciples do, but it was never meant to be done on their own. And it is a huge failure until Jesus shows up. So let's look, Mark chapter 9, we're going to start in verse 14. Verse 14. Now, what's happening as we read, when they came to the disciples, that's Jesus and then the favorite three, who are Peter, James, and John. Yes, absolutely. So they were up on the Mount of Transfiguration. They were up on the mountain, and they basically just got a glimpse of who Jesus truly was in his divine nature, in his God image. And so they spent time on the mountain with Jesus, realizing that he is actually God divine, and now they're coming back down. But they don't come down and just meet up. There's a problem that's going on. So let's look. Verse 14. When they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them, and scribes arguing with them. So what happens is they show up, Jesus and the three, and they're in the midst of an argument taking place. The disciples and the scribes, and they're arguing. Verse 15, immediately all the crowd, when they saw him, that's Jesus, they were greatly amazed, and they ran up, and they greeted him. So when they come back, all these people are eager to see Jesus. Why? Not necessarily because, oh look, it's Jesus is finally here. These people would have seen Jesus before. But there's a problem going on, and they think Jesus might be able to help. And so they're eager, and they're running around him, and they greet him, and they're surrounding him. Now verse 16. So he asked, that's Jesus, what are you arguing about with them? He asked his disciples, what's going on here? What's the problem? Why are we arguing? Well, verse 17. Someone from the crowd answered him. So he asked the disciples the question, but another person pipes in and says, this is what's taking place. Someone from the crowd answered him, Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. Okay, he's possessed. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down and foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able. So they're not able to deal with the issue themselves. And so everybody's glad Jesus has come back. Now, Matthew and Luke also give this account. Matthew tells us of the Father that he's basically begging Jesus to do something. And Luke will tell us that this is the man's only son. So you can realize as a dad, your only son, possessed by a demon, some type of spirit, and it's really causing the son a lot of pain. It's been going on for a while. He really wants Jesus to do something about it. But the disciples were not able to do it. Now, why were the disciples not able to do it? Well, we'll keep reading. Verse 19. And he answered them, "O," that's Jesus, "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him," that's the child, "bring him to me." Here's what we see. The faithless disciples. That's the first thing we see in the passage. The disciples, it doesn't mean that they don't have faith. Okay? It doesn't mean that they have completely just gotten rid of their faith. What it means is their faith is really weak. Not necessarily in who Jesus is, but they aren't relying on Jesus. They're not relying on God in the way that they should be. So the reason that this has happened, Jesus says, "O faithless generation." And it's really a cry of disappointment. You can hear it when he says, "How long am I to be with you?" As a disciple, you're thinking, man, it's kind of tough, but they have lacked faith in him, and they've lacked faith in God, and it's become an unexpected problem. Why is it an unexpected problem? Because in Mark chapter 6, we read that the disciples were given authority to cast out demons. They had the capability. And further in the chapter, it says they've already done that successfully. So this isn't something that they haven't done before. They have cast out demons before. But for some particular reason, they can't cast out this demon from this child. And God's going to say it's an issue of faith. So he says, "You faithless generation." He says, "Bring them to me." Verse 20. And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, that's when the demon saw Jesus, immediately it convulsed the boy, and it fell on the ground and rolled around foaming. So now the episode that the Father has explained is now taking place, and Jesus sees it, the crowd sees it, everybody knows what's going on. Now at this point, Jesus asked the Father, verse 21, "How long has this been happening to him?" And the Father says, "From childhood." If you remember when we looked at this miracle a way back, at this point it's really strange, because when the demon possesses the child and convulses the child, and you know the symptoms, the child is foaming, rolling around uncontrollably, everybody's looking, and Jesus turns and has a conversation with the Father. Like, there's an issue going on with the boy convulsing on the ground right now, and Jesus says, "I'll get to you in a minute, I need to talk to the Father." And you're like, well, why would he do that? Because the issue is faith in this passage, not necessarily what's taking place with the child. Another thing, do you think Jesus is really worried? Jesus knew, I can heal this boy. I'm absolutely positive that I can heal this boy. But I need to check the Father and why he has come to me. So let's see what the Father does. So he asked, "How long has this been happening?" Do you think Jesus really needed a diagnosis of all the symptoms to heal the boy? No. He's setting up the Father, and he's wanting the Father to contemplate why he brought this boy to Jesus. Like, why did you come to me? So verse 22, what we see is, we had faithless disciples, now we're going to see a faithless Father. Verse 22, "It has often cast him into fire and into water to destroy him, but if you can do anything," if you can do anything, it's an unsure request from the Father at this point, because of the if in the clause. If you can do anything, it's saying, yeah, it would be nice if you could do something, Jesus. It's not, I know you can do something, please do it. There's doubt in his request. There's doubt in the reason he came to Jesus. And so Jesus, hence why he has turned away from the boy and focused on the Father. And the boy is convulsing still at this point. And he says there's an issue with the Father that is more important, that needs to take place. So we have a faithless Father. Verse 23, Jesus says to him kind of sarcastically, "What do you mean, if I can do anything?" What does he say? "If I can, all things are possible for the one who believes." And so while the Father is faithless, while the disciples lacked faith as well, Jesus says all things are possible for those who believe and have faith. All things. In Matthew's account, this is the point where you hear, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. And it basically means with faith, you can do the impossible. And so Jesus turns to the Father and says, what do you mean if I can do it? So you had faithless disciples, you had a faithless Father, but what you see here is a faith-filled Jesus. He is completely sure. Remember Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for. He is positive. I will also just give you a warning that if your prayer life includes if, and we're going to get to prayer life at the end of this because that's where Jesus is heading. If your prayer life includes something like, God, if you're able to do something, please do it, we need to reevaluate the way we pray. God is able to do it. God is able. It's not a question of if He can. He is all-powerful and almighty. He most definitely can. When we ask if, it's kind of a bit of doubt on our part. And so just like the Father here, and just like the disciples, but unlike Jesus, He has complete faith. Complete faith. And that's why He takes this unexpected interest in this Father. While the boy, still remember, at this point, the boy is rolling around convulsing on the ground, foaming at the mouth, and Jesus is so concerned with the Father because He's so worried about the heart of people and their faith in Him that it tops everything else that's taking place. And of course, we know the boy is going to be okay. Jesus knows the boy is going to be okay, but He's concerned with the Father in how He's dealing with this. So, verse 24, we're going to see Jesus kind of give some instruction. Jesus is going to change the scenario that's taking place and kind of teach each of these people the problem that they have. So He gives what we'll call some faith-directed instruction, because it's all about faith. Here, in the majority of the miracles, all the miracles revolve around faith. Numerous times after miracles, Jesus says what? By faith you are healed. By faith, go. It's faith that does something to them in the way in which He acts with them. So verse 24. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, help my unbelief. Probably my favorite response in the Bible, because you can relate to that in some areas of your life. There are times in life where you're completely sure in Christ, and then maybe something happens, something tragic, and there comes to a point where you start questioning or doubting and thinking, well, God, is God able? Is God able to help me with this? Is God able to rescue me from what I'm going through? And the man is saying, hey, I believe, but there's still parts of me that don't believe. There's still parts of me that struggle with not believing fully. And I need help with that. It's a humble and it's an honest response from the man, which is beautiful, I think, for Jesus to hear, because he cries this out to Jesus. The best person that we can tell about our need for more faith, that we're struggling in faith, we're struggling with whatever it is that we're going through, the best person we can tell is Christ and God. And that's what this man does. He says, I believe, but Jesus, I need you to help my unbelief. The parts of me that are still unsure, I need you to change that. I need you to help me with that. And so he restores this man's faith. You see this faith restored, and it's the Father's perspective of it. Also, this is a great prayer for us. This one right here. Lord, help me believe. Lord, help me believe. Lord, help me believe. Even if you do, just say, Lord, help me believe. Wholeheartedly, full faith in you and who you are. Because a small amount of faith can really disrupt even great amounts that you have. It only takes a little doubt. Think all the way back to Genesis. It only took a little bit of doubt for Adam and Eve. Well, is God giving you the best? Will you surely die? It only takes a little doubt. And Satan will run with it and destroy it. So you see the Father here, his faith is restored. Finally, verse 25. When Jesus saw that the crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." At this point, Jesus decides to turn back to the boy and say, "All right, I'm going to heal the boy." And we see the health is restored in this young boy. He rebukes this unclean spirit, this demon, and says, "Don't enter him ever again." He's helped him. Verse 26, after crying out, convulsing him terribly, so this demon gives one last strong stand, and then he leaves him. Now, the way he leaves him is interesting because when the demon leaves him and the spirit leaves him, the boy is basically on the ground, and people start asking, well, he's dead, because he looks dead like a corpse. And so they're like, well, what's going on? The boy is dead. But you see there in verse 26, Jesus took him by the hand, and on verse 27, took him by the hand, lifted him up, and he arose. Full health restored. You know what's funny? I think about this passage. There was another person in Scripture who appeared to be dead, who was dead, appeared to have lost, like this situation. Everybody's thinking, well, Jesus didn't do it. He didn't heal this boy. The boy's now dead. But guess what? 3 days later, Jesus rose from the grave. He triumphed. Any battle, any conflict, any war between Jesus and Satan, whether it be through Jesus here and a demon possession, whatever it may be, any conflict between Jesus and Satan always ends with Jesus giving life. He is always victorious, never defeated by Satan. And so you see this boy's health restored. He took him by the hand and he rose. Now, verse 28, he goes back to instruct the disciples of why they have failed. And when he entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, probably because they were a little embarrassed to ask him publicly, "Why could we not cast it out?" And he said to them, "This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer." Now, remember, they were able to cast out demons before. They had the authority, but this time they failed. And Jesus says, the problem is you were faithless, back in verse 19, "O faithless generation." And in Matthew, he says, "O ye of little faith." But then he says, this kind must be cast out by prayer. Now, what does that mean? Did you see Jesus praying in the passage? It doesn't say Jesus went away and prayed while this boy was convulsing. What he's doing is he's directing them to how to strengthen their faith. The only way you strengthen your faith is to have a relationship with God and with Christ. Through prayer, we know a lot as we read through the Gospels that Jesus left, went off by himself, isolation, so that he could spend time with the Father. Why did Jesus need to do that? So he could completely rely on him. Jesus was tested in the desert. Guess what? He completely relied on God because he was spending so much time with God that his faith was full. He was so certain that God the Father was the way, that he was all-powerful, almighty, could take care of any situation that came his way. And so when he comes to this boy, and he said, and convulsions happening, Jesus is thinking, the boy can be healed. It's not a question of if the boy can be healed. The question is, do you have faith for the boy to be healed? A lot of times we're like the disciples, and we try to, like I did, putting that board up, silly, like myself, it wasn't meant to be done by me alone. The disciples' ability to cast out demons was not by their own power. Probably what happens in the passage is they try to do it their own way and by their own power. Well, they've already done this. Man, they can handle this. They got this. But it fails because they're not doing it according to God's power and God's way. Sometimes we're like the father in the passage, and we say, well, we believe, but there's just a little bit of doubt in there. Just a little bit I'm not sure about. We can be completely sure in every word of Scripture than what it says. Our faith can be solid. On Christ the solid rock I stand. Although the ground is sinking sand. Christ will not fail. Never. And that's what happens here in this passage. He comes in and says, the question is not if the boy can be healed. Oh, ye of little faith. Ye of little faith. We need to be a people who stand firm in our faith, like Jesus did in this passage. I believe God can heal the boy. That's not the question. The question is, do you have faith, Father? Do you have faith, disciples? Do we have faith that God is able to take care of every circumstance in our life, no matter what it is, to give us strength, to bring us through, to help us walk in righteousness? We need God's power. Apart from Him, we're not able to do much at all. So remember that. This passage, Jesus is trying to teach these people, you got to have faith. Even in difficult situations, when your boy is convulsing on the ground, will you have faith? When things aren't going the way that they normally do, like the disciples, will you have faith? And how do you keep the faith? You got to spend time with God. That's why reading your Bible every day is so important. That's why praying is so important. I'll close with this. Your prayer life reflects, and I would say your time with God and His Word, and your prayer life reflects how much you really need, you think you need God. The more we spend in His Word and praying shows, man, God, we need you. Be a people that say every day, God, I need you. I need you, I need you, I need you. I can't do it without myself. All right, let's pray.